My name is Daniel Cross, and I'm a 57-year-old man who grew up in the wide, flat plains of the Midwest, where the summers smell like cut grass and diesel engines, and the winters teach you the meaning of grit. I'm not a fancy man. I'm not some polished city guy with soft hands and a trust fund. I'm just a bloke who spent a lifetime working, sweating, grinding, and somehow ended up with a story so twisted, so unbelievable that even now, telling it out loud feels like I'm opening an old wound that never fully healed. This story, my story, begins with a truth most people don't want to face. Sometimes the people closest to you don't love you. They love what you can give them. And I learned that the hard way. See, mate, I wasn't always this quiet man living by himself at the edge of town. For most of my life, I was the one everybody called when things fell apart. I was the fixer, the helper, the guy who always had a little extra cash tucked away for emergencies. My phone would ring at 2 in the morning, and instead of sleeping through it, I'd crawl out of bed and answer. Because maybe it was one of my kids needing gas money, or my sister needing help with her bills, or my nephew begging for one more loan, until payday. Funny how payday never came around. I built my business from the ground up, a chain of small auto shops scattered across 3 different states. Nothing fancy. No giant corporate logo or shiny skyscraper, just garages where hardworking folks brought in their cars, drank burnt coffee, and trusted me not to scam them blind. My hands were always dirty, my back always sore, and my clothes always smelled faintly of motor oil. But it was honest, it was real, and it was mine. But somewhere along the years, somewhere between the birthdays I missed because I was working late and the weekends I spent patching up customers' trucks instead of taking vacations, something changed in my family. The love wasn't the same. Their voices shifted, their eyes shifted, and before I knew it, I wasn't a father or a brother or an uncle. I was a damn ATM with a heartbeat. Every conversation came with strings attached. Dad, could you spot me just this once? Unc, I swear I'll pay you back next week. Danny, you know you're doing better than the rest of us. Can you help? At first I didn't see it. Then I chose not to see it. Then I couldn't pretend anymore. The turning point came one night late, the kind of late where the house is too quiet and every sound echoes off the walls. I was sitting at the head of a big dining table that could seat 12 people, but there was nobody there. Just me. Me and the ghost of a family I used to recognize. Me and the hum of a refrigerator that was louder than the voices of the people who were supposed to care about me. And as I sat there staring at my reflection in the dark window, I felt this heavy realization settle on my shoulders like a winter storm pressing down on a thin rooftop. If I lost everything tomorrow, not one of them would stay. That thought didn't feel like a passing worry. It felt like truth. Cold, blunt, undeniable. I didn't sleep that night, not a wink. I just kept replaying every moment I'd brushed off, every ignored birthday call, every rushed holiday visit, every moment one of my kids looked at me and saw not a father but a resource. And by the time the sun started bleeding light across the horizon, I made a decision that would change everything. Not just for me, but for them. I decided to disappear. Not physically, not the kind of disappearance where folks put your picture on missing posters. No, I decided to disappear financially. I decided to step out of my own life and watch from the shadows, just to see what was real and what wasn't. To see who cared about me and who cared about my bank account. So I shut down the noise. I stopped loaning money. Stopped solving everyone's problems. Stopped being the safety net they kept leaping onto. And then I dropped the bomb. I let everyone believe I had lost everything. Every penny. Every asset. Every shop. Gone. Bankruptcy. Economic collapse, bad investments. Whatever rumor they wanted to believe, I let it live. I told myself it was just a test, a little experiment to see the truth. But deep down, I knew this wasn't about curiosity. It was about survival. It was about finding out whether the people I built my life around actually gave a damn about me, or if they were just orbiting the money I'd worked myself half to death to earn. I expected disappointment. I expected some distance. But nothing prepared me for what actually happened. Because once I lost everything, I might as well have vanished from the earth. The phone stopped ringing. The visits stopped. The little "love you, Dad" texts turned to silence. Birthdays went by like blank calendar pages, and I realized something gut-wrenching. My family didn't step away because I disappeared. They stepped away because the money did. And just when I thought the worst was behind me, just when I was ready to accept the loneliness and start rebuilding my life from the ashes, a lawyer walked into my world. Not a fancy lawyer with a silver tongue and polished shoes. No, this bloke came in like a wrecking ball, delivering news so shocking, so heavy, so destructive, that it ripped the mask off every single person in my family. He didn't just bring information. He brought truth. And truth, when it hits, doesn't tap you on the shoulder. It smashes your life apart and forces you to see what's underneath. And that moment, the moment the lawyer arrived, was the moment I realized I hadn't lost everything.
I always figured by the time a man hit his late 50s, he'd have some sense of peace, some kind of steady warmth around him, family dropping by just to talk, kids checking in, a little noise in the house that didn't come from the television. But my house had turned into a quiet museum full of trophies, ledgers, and memories I'd worked too hard for and appreciated too little. My name is Daniel Cross, and by 57 I had more success than I ever dreamed of having back when I was swinging wrenches at 18 in that freezing Midwest garage. Back then, I didn't have fancy tools or a staff. I had grit, calloused hands, a stubborn backbone that didn't know how to quit. And over the years, one dusty shop turned into 3, then 6, then 9. Auto shops spread across 3 states, all under my name. Not bad for a kid who once fixed cars out of a borrowed shed. But success, as I learned the hard way, doesn't just attract customers. It attracts the kind of family members who only remember you when their tank is empty. Now let me be clear. I wasn't some angel strolling through life. I made mistakes. I missed PTA meetings, forgot anniversaries, worked through holidays. My ambition came with a price, and sometimes that price was closeness. Maybe that helped create the distance, but the way my family behaved, that wasn't distance. That was entitlement dressed up as love. My daughter Emily had always been sharp as a tack, top of her class, full-ride scholarship, quick with a smile but quicker with an opinion. 31 now, engaged to a guy I never trusted but tolerated because I didn't want to lose her. When she spoke, she always made it sound like she was doing you a favor by acknowledging you. She had her mother's eyes but my fire, and somehow neither trait softened her. My son Josh, on the other hand, ran through life like it was a game show he was losing on purpose. 29 years old, drifting from one job to another, always with some dream he'd get to eventually. I loved the kid, but love doesn't blind you. He was always chasing shortcuts, always hunting for the fastest way out of responsibility and the fastest way into my wallet. Then came my younger sister, Carla, 49 and allergic to stability. She hopped between business ideas, each one worse than the last. Candle making, pet sitting, online crystals, motivational videos. She was a walking infomercial without a product. But she always found time to look stylish, always found time to take vacations she couldn't afford, always found time to borrow money. Paying it back. That was a myth she didn't believe in. And my nephew Tyler, well, he liked to call me Unc in that tone people use when they're pretending to be close. 25, always between gigs, always just sorting things out. He wasn't a bad kid, just a careless one. And somehow I had become his personal safety net. If trouble had a face, it'd look like Tyler on a Thursday afternoon, calling me for the 3rd time that month. I carried these people, carried them so long that my shoulders didn't remember what freedom felt like. Every bill they couldn't handle, every mess they wouldn't deal with, every poor choice they made, they dropped on my doorstep like a bag of trash. And I picked it up every damn time. But the weight of that responsibility, it doesn't disappear, it just sinks deeper, like cold water slowly filling a boat. One Sunday afternoon, when the leaves outside were turning gold and the sun had that soft early fall glow, I asked the whole family to come over. I expected questions, worry, maybe a hint of curiosity. Instead, they arrived like I was hosting an event that cut into their schedules. Emily walked in first, tapping away on her phone, barely glancing at me. "This better be quick, Dad. I've got a showing to get to." Josh sauntered in like he owned the place, grabbed a drink from the fridge without asking, and flopped on the couch with a smirk. Carla came in with that fake dramatic sigh she used whenever she wanted sympathy, brushing her hair back like the world weighed on her shoulders. And Tyler walked in with a bag of greasy fast food. The kid stained my rug before he even said hello. I stood in front of them, this family I poured blood, sweat, and years into, and felt something inside me crack, like a quiet pop, something small but final. I looked each of them in the eye and delivered the lie that would become the truth of who they really were. "I've hit a rough patch," I said slowly. "The business is failing, money's tight. I don't know how long I can hold things together." Silence usually has weight, heaviness, concern, but theirs, it had calculation. Emily's head finally looked up from her phone, but only to ask, "So does that mean you can't help with my down payment anymore?" She didn't ask why things were failing, didn't ask if I was okay. She just wanted to know what this meant for her life plan. Josh leaned back, snorted, and said, "Knew this was coming. You always acted like you had it under control. Guess not." His tone wasn't sadness, it was smugness, like my fall made him feel taller. Carla crossed her arms, raising a brow. "So, about that 5 grand, should I still pay it back? I mean, if you're struggling, maybe we can call it even." Tyler was the only one who put a hand on my shoulder, but it was a pat, not comfort, a hollow gesture. "Man, that's rough," he murmured. And then, "So, can I still borrow your truck this weekend?" Right there in my own living room, I was Daniel. I was Dad. I was Unc. I was a service, a resource, a bank account with legs. And the moment I told them the well might be drying up, they didn't show concern. They just tried to figure out how much water was left. When they finally left, Emily rushing, Josh rolling his eyes, Carla sighing, Tyler stuffing the last of his fries into his mouth, I stood alone in the echo of what used to be my family. I walked to my room, took off my watch, my jacket, my identity as their provider, and set it all on the dresser. And for the first time in years, I let myself imagine a world where I didn't owe them anything, where I didn't have to keep holding everyone up. That night, staring at the ceiling in the dark, I whispered something I hadn't dared say out loud in decades. "I'm done." But I wasn't done with life. I was done being used. And that was when the plan came to me, slow at first, then flooding in like a storm breaking open. I was going to let them believe I'd lost everything. I was going to strip myself of the one thing they valued about me, money. And then I'd finally learn the truth. Who loved me, and who loved what I gave them. I didn't know it yet, but this was the moment my life began to split, before and after the lie. And the after. Well, that part turned out darker than anything I imagined. Over the next week, I lived like two different versions of myself were walking around inside the same body. One version, the old Daniel, still woke up early, brewed his black coffee, read the news, tried to keep things normal. But the new Daniel, he was dismantling his life piece by piece, quietly, carefully, like a man taking apart a bomb he built with his own hands. The first thing I did was sell one of my auto shops. Not publicly, not with announcements. I sold it through a private buyer my lawyer connected me with, someone who didn't ask questions and paid in full within 48 hours. I transferred that money into a trust with a name no one would ever look at twice. It was tucked away so deep that even if someone tore my life apart with a magnifying glass, they wouldn't find a cent. Then I adjusted the rest of my finances, shifted, moved, disguised. Nothing illegal, just invisible. My accountant thought I was preparing for early retirement. In a way, I guess I was. I was retiring from being everyone's off-the-books ATM. But the moment my family felt even the slightest change, the shift in their behavior hit me harder than any financial blow I'd ever taken. When Emily called a few days later asking, no, expecting me to help cover the last chunk of her wedding venue deposit, I took a breath and calmly said, "Sweetheart, I really can't right now. I'm trying to get back on my feet." The silence that followed wasn't confusion. It was offense. "Seriously, Dad," she said, her voice ice cold. "You promised you'd help." "Emily, things changed. I'm..." "Right, whatever, forget it." She hung up before I could say anything else. By that night, her texts dried up like a summer creek. Josh didn't confront me directly, not at first. No, he did what he always did. He went around telling people I'd let the family down, that I'd finally messed up. He painted me as if I'd toppled from some imaginary throne, and all because I told him I couldn't bankroll his latest business, half-baked online side hustle involving teams and leadership levels. I wasn't stupid. Even a possum stuck in a trash can could see it was a scam. Carla was the worst in terms of dramatics. She whispered to anyone who'd listen that I was pretending to be broke for sympathy, that she had a feeling I was hiding money. She said it with this bitter edge in her voice, like my refusal to fund her lifestyle was a personal betrayal, as if my existence revolved around floating her bills. And Tyler, that kid didn't even pretend. He called me frantic, saying he'd gotten yet another speeding ticket and just needed a couple $100 to make it go away. I told him, as politely as I could, "I'm sorry, kid. I can't help you this time." He sighed with that dramatic, annoyed sound only young people perfected, said cool, whatever, and hung up. And then he blocked my number. Blocked. Like I was spam. Like I was a robocall trying to sell him an extended warranty. Every day after that felt like I was disappearing one piece at a time, not physically, not literally, but emotionally, spiritually, the way a man disappears when the people he loves most stop seeing him. The breaking point came on a cold Friday night. I was sitting in my recliner, heating up leftover lasagna, the kind that never tastes the way you remember it, when my phone buzzed with a notification. I clicked it without thinking. A photo filled the screen. A big, bright, joyful photo. Emily's engagement party. Fairy lights, champagne, a crowd, music, laughter. My daughter in a dress I'd never seen, smiling from ear to ear. Josh clinking glasses with her fiancé. Carla holding a plate piled with food she didn't pay for. Tyler doing some stupid dance in the background. Everyone was there. Everyone except me. And worse, I hadn't even been invited. No text. No call. Not even a fake apology about small venue limits. Nothing. I stared at that photo until my eyes blurred. The smile on Emily's face was the same one she had when she was 10 and won her science fair. The same one I'd seen when I lifted her on my shoulders at the county fair. It used to be a smile meant for me. Now it existed in a world I wasn't part of. I didn't cry. I didn't yell. I didn't throw the phone. I just sat there, still, silent. And in that silence, something inside me finally gave out. It wasn't a loud break, not a snap. It was a quiet crumble like old paint falling off a forgotten wall. It was the realization that I hadn't just been forgotten. I'd been replaced. Not as a person, as a resource. That night, I made the decision that changed everything. I wasn't going to confront them. They didn't deserve the energy. I wasn't going to explain myself. Explanations were for relationships. We didn't have one. I wasn't going to shout, beg, ask for attention, or fight for space at a table where no one saved me a seat. I was going to vanish, not physically but emotionally, financially, socially. No more calls. No more happy birthday, texts they only sent after Facebook reminded them. No more showing up to solve problems they created. No more letting them treat me like a doormat with a bank account. Let them feel what absence actually looked like. Let them learn what it meant to lose a man they never appreciated. And for a moment, I thought disappearing was all there was to the plan. But life loves irony. Life loves timing. Life loves throwing a twist into the script right when a man thinks he's got the next scene figured out. Because 3 weeks into my disappearance, 3 weeks of silence, of quiet, of peace mixed with the ache of loneliness, a knock came at my door. Not a light knock. Not a hesitant one. A firm, confident, almost rehearsed knock. I opened the door and saw a man in a tailored suit, crisp white shirt, polished shoes, and a leather briefcase tucked under his arm. His tie wasn't cheap. His haircut wasn't either. His expression was serious but not unfriendly. "Mr. Cross?" he asked, voice smooth as a radio host. "Yes." "My name is David Lorne," he said, lifting a business card toward me. "I'm an attorney. I represent an estate and I need to discuss something with you, something important." And just like that, with one polished shoe on my doormat, the man who would blow my life wide open stepped into my world. And he didn't even know it yet.
It was a Thursday afternoon, the kind where the air feels too thick to breathe and even the birds seem too tired to chirp. Humid, slow, the kind of day where nothing should happen, where life should stay quiet and uneventful. I was outside working on a loose fence hinge, sweat dripping down my neck, when I heard the crunch of tires on gravel. I looked up expecting a delivery truck or maybe a neighbor, but instead, a long black sedan rolled to a stop in my driveway. Sleek, expensive, out of place in my modest yard. The door opened and a man stepped out, straight-backed, sharp-edged and polished in a way that made me instantly suspicious. He looked like he'd walked right off the set of a courtroom drama. Gray tailored suit, crisp white shirt, dark tie knotted perfectly. His shoes were so shiny I could practically see my confused reflection in them. And his hair, slicked back so precisely it could have cut fence wire cleaner than any tool in my shed. He approached with a firm stride, one hand holding a slim leather briefcase. "Mr. Daniel Cross?" he asked, his voice smooth, clipped, professional. I wiped my hands on my jeans and squinted at him. "That depends," I said. "Are you selling something? Because if it's one of those solar panel deals..." He allowed himself a small smirk just at the corner of his mouth. "Actually, sir, I'm delivering something." Delivering something. From a man dressed like he works 3 floors above the clouds. That couldn't be good. He opened his briefcase with a clean metallic click and pulled out a thick envelope, cream-colored, heavy, sealed with a gold emblem pressed into the center. It wasn't the kind of envelope you toss around. It looked official, old-fashioned, serious. "My name is Jonathan Reeves," he continued, offering a business card with the kind of steady confidence that comes from knowing you're about to drop a bomb on someone's life. "Attorney. I represent a former business associate of yours." A chill ran across my shoulders despite the heat. There was only one person that could be. Richard Malone. My mentor. My partner in the early days. My friend, even after the business paths diverged. Richard was the man who looked at a 20-year-old mechanic with busted hands and more ambition than sense and said, "Danny, you're the kind of guy who will either build an empire or burn one down. Let's hope for the first. He taught me everything the textbooks left out. How to negotiate without losing your soul. How to spot a liar before they open their mouth. How to make a customer feel like family. We didn't always agree, but we always trusted each other. And 2 months ago he died. Just like that. A sudden heart attack. Gone before I could even return his last voicemail. My throat tightened as Jonathan spoke again. Mr. Malone left specific instructions regarding you, he said, and then his voice dipped with a weight I didn't like. And regarding your family. That last part hit like a brick. What instructions? I asked, trying to read the man's face. He didn't blink, didn't shift, didn't even breathe wrong. He just nodded toward the envelope in my hands. You'll want to read that alone, he said. When you're ready, call me, my number inside. And with that, he turned, walked back to his sleek black sedan, and drove away, leaving me standing in the yard with that heavy envelope sweating in my palm. For a long moment, I didn't move. I just stared at the seal. It felt like the world had gone quiet. Too quiet. Eventually, I made my way inside, sat at the kitchen table, the same table where I'd eaten microwaved lasagna on the night my family abandoned me, and just held the envelope. My hands were shaking. I hadn't even realized how much I missed Richard until sitting there with his handwriting staring back at me. Finally, with a deep breath, I broke the seal. Inside was a letter. Handwritten. Messy, rushed, uneven, exactly how Richard always wrote when his thoughts were moving faster than his pen. I unfolded it and began to read. Danny, if you're reading this, then my time ran out. I never was good with the sentimental stuff, so I won't pretend now. You were more than a friend, you were the brother I chose. I stopped reading for a second. Swallowed hard. That word, brother, hit me like a punch to the chest. I kept going. But you were always surrounded by people who wanted your success more than they wanted you. I told you that for years, didn't I? I warned you. You didn't listen, so I'm giving you something I know you won't ignore. My heart thudded slower. He wasn't writing like a man leaving a gift. He was writing like a man setting up a test. The next morning felt heavier than usual, like the world had thickened overnight. I barely slept. My mind kept replaying Richard's letter, every word like an echo in a hollow room inside my chest. By sunrise, I forced myself out of the house, got into my truck, and drove toward downtown, toward the office where Jonathan Reeves waited with answers I didn't know how to digest. The building was one of those places designed to intimidate you before you even step inside. Tall glass windows, black stone pillars, a revolving door that spun so silently it felt like it swallowed people whole. Inside, everything smelled of polished wood, leather, and cold professionalism. A receptionist with perfect posture led me down a hallway lined with framed degrees and courtroom sketches. Each step made my heart beat harder, like I was walking toward a verdict. Jonathan Reeves stood when I entered his office, offering a polite nod before gesturing for me to sit. His desk was neat to the point of obsession, papers aligned, pens in a straight line, not a single thing out of place. He reached for a large folder resting in front of him, tapping it twice before speaking, as if preparing me for a weight that couldn't be delivered gently. Mr. Cross, he began, his voice steady, thank you for coming in so promptly. I understand this may be a difficult time. I nodded, though difficult wasn't even close. He opened the folder and turned it toward me, revealing documents stamped with legal seals, maps, photos, and signatures that looked like ghosts from the past. As I mentioned yesterday, he said, Mr. Malone left you an asset, a substantial one. I tried to brace myself. I failed. Your friend owned an estate, 46 acres of private land. My eyebrows twitched upward instinctively. But he wasn't done. A fully furnished lodge in the center of the property, equipped for year-round living. 3 rental cabins along the northern ridge. a lakeside building he used for recreation and occasional business gatherings. It took a moment for the words to register. I kept waiting for him to shift tone, maybe smile and say he misspoke, but Jonathan's professionalism was ironclad. He continued reading details while I sat there breathing like the room had lost oxygen. This wasn't a house. This wasn't some old cabin. This was a whole world. Jonathan lifted his gaze, watching my reaction with the quiet patience of someone accustomed to delivering life-changing news. "There is more," he said. "Mr. Malone named you the sole beneficiary." The words hit harder than they should have. Sole, not shared, not partial, not divided. Sole. I blinked slowly, staring at the table because I didn't trust my voice. Jonathan clarified, as though he feared I hadn't heard. "You are the only person he left it to. Not your children, not your sister, not any extended relatives. Only you." Inside my chest, something pressed tightly against my ribs. Richard hadn't just trusted me. He had deliberately chosen me over everyone else. He had seen me. He had valued me. And for the first time in a long time, I felt something close to grief mixed with honor, mixed with a strange sense of loneliness. I managed to whisper, "Why would he do that?" Jonathan gave the faintest hint of a smile, more gentle than amused. "Because he believed you would take care of it. And because he believed you deserved something that wasn't constantly taken from you." I lowered my gaze again, swallowing a painful lump that had no name. But as always, life doesn't hand you good news without slipping a blade behind it. Jonathan cleared his throat, straightened a few papers, and said in a quieter voice, "However, Mr. Malone left specific conditions attached to this inheritance." My stomach tightened. There it was, the turn. The reason I was here and not holding a simple envelope with a congratulatory message. Jonathan continued, his tone careful. "These conditions involve your family." Of course they did. The universe always circled back to them, didn't it? My breath came out slow and shaky. "What kind of conditions?" I asked, though I wasn't sure I wanted the answer. Jonathan folded his hands and leaned forward. "You are not to inform them about the estate directly. They will learn about it soon through the public probate filing. Mr. Malone wanted them to discover it naturally." I stared at him, naturally meaning without me warning them. "Exactly," he said. No warnings, no explanations. He wanted to observe their authentic reaction. My heart sank deeper with every word. Jonathan continued, "You are allowed to say nothing. You are allowed to lie, divert, or distance yourself. He granted you complete freedom to observe their behavior." I let out a low, humorless laugh. So he wanted a test. "Yes," Jonathan replied, "but not for them, for you. He believed you've been carrying the weight of people who don't carry you back. He wanted you to see their intentions without your presence cushioning the truth." I sat silently. The room around me felt colder. Richard had known. He must have seen the way my family treated me. He must have heard the stories. Maybe he had watched me give and give and give until there was nothing left but exhaustion disguised as politeness. Jonathan slid a second envelope toward me, a heavy one. Keys clinked inside. "These are the estate keys and access documents," he explained. "Inside you'll find property maps, building inventories, maintenance logs, and valuation reports." He paused before adding, "The estate has been appraised at $8.4 million. The words punched the air out of my lungs. 8.4 million. Not 800,000, not even a single million. 8.4. The kind of number that bends people, the kind of number that reveals who they truly are. Jonathan's voice softened. "I understand this may feel overwhelming. You have time to process. There is no immediate action required on your part. I will file the public notice next week. Once it becomes official, your family, and anyone with access to estate announcements, will be informed." I pressed a hand against my forehead. And I'm supposed to just watch. He nodded. Yes, watch, listen, and do nothing until you've seen enough. Outside the window, cars moved like quiet currents through the city. People lived their lives, unaware that everything in mine had just been rearranged, redefined, rewired. I stood slowly, pocketing the keys that felt like holding the future itself. Jonathan offered a respectful nod. Prepare yourself, Mr. Cross. When people believe there is money, especially this amount, belonging to them, their true nature rarely stays hidden. I stepped out of the office feeling like I was walking on a tightrope over a canyon. The sunlight was too bright, the air too sharp. I drove home in silence, unable to think about anything except one chilling truth. My family was about to find out about the estate. And the probate notice went public on a Monday morning so ordinary it almost felt offensive. The sky was pale, the air still, the neighborhood quiet enough to hear the distant hum of someone mowing their lawn. Nothing about that morning warned me that the world, my world, was about to shift again. I was in the backyard fixing a loose faucet, hands covered in grime, when my phone began buzzing inside the house. At first it was just one vibration, then another, and then it didn't stop. It was as if my phone had swallowed a beehive. By the time I got inside and wiped my hands enough to check the screen, the notifications stacked on top of each other like a digital avalanche. The first name flashing across the screen was one I hadn't seen in a while. Emily. Dad, hey, been thinking about you, can we talk? The message was drenched in exclamation marks and fake cheer, the kind she used when she wanted something, or when she was lying. And considering this was the daughter who didn't think twice before excluding me from our engagement party, this sudden burst of affection felt like a cheap perfume sprayed over something rotten. Before I even digested her message, another one came in. Josh. Yo, Pops heard some news, call me ASAP. A short, blunt message with all the subtlety of a bulldozer. Heard some news, right? Of course he had. News travels faster through greedy hands than loving hearts. And then, of course, Carla. Daniel, honey, I'm coming over. Big emergency. She didn't specify whose emergency it was. Knowing her, the emergency was whatever she wasn't getting from me. Seconds later, Tyler chimed in. Unc, I know we haven't talked, but you gotta call me back. Like now. He didn't even try pretending he cared. Tyler never had the patience for performance. And there it was. Within hours, the people who had erased me from their lives suddenly remembered my number. The sudden warmth in their words felt so fake it almost made my skin crawl, like someone turning on a lamp that had been broken for years. But I wasn't shocked, not anymore. I didn't pick up, I didn't call back. I didn't even open their follow-up messages, which kept popping up with growing urgency. I let them stew. I wanted to see how far they'd go. And I didn't have to wait long. By evening, as the sky darkened into a smudged shade of purple and the streetlights flickered awake, a thunderous pounding rattled my front door. It wasn't a knock. It was the kind of hit you deliver when you think the door owes you something. I opened it. And there they were. The entire cast of the We Love You When You Have Money family reunion. Emily stood in front, her hair styled, her dress pressed, her face set in a smile that was colder than her engagement party invitation list. She launched herself forward, arms wide, wrapping me in a hug so sudden it nearly knocked me back. Dad, she chirped, we were so worried about you. Worried, sure. So worried she couldn't even text me back last week. Behind her, Josh towered with that casual swagger he used when he was trying to appear cool while hiding panic. So, Uncle Richard left you a place. That's insane, right? Carla didn't even wait for permission. She brushed past me into the house, sniffing around like a bloodhound searching for treasure, her eyes darting from shelf to table, as if expecting to find a briefcase full of cash leaning casually against my toaster. And then came Tyler, the last in line, offering a half hug that smelled like too much cologne and poor decisions. "You look great, Unc. Real sharp, real strong, real generous, maybe." I crossed my arms and leaned against the kitchen counter, watching them drift around my home like tourists evaluating a property they hoped to claim for themselves. So I finally said, "What's this about?" Emily stepped forward, smiling with a sweetness thick enough to choke on. "Oh, Dad, we just wanted to check on you, and maybe talk about the estate. Figure out how we can help." I tilted my head. "Help me with what?" She blinked rapidly, scrambling for her next line. "Well, with the property, since it'll belong to all of us." And there it was, the mask slipping, the truth blinking like a neon sign. Josh stepped in, scratching the back of his neck. "Look, we're not saying it's ours, just kinda ours, family, you know." Carla placed a hand on my shoulder with the kind of false tenderness that made my skin crawl. "We just want to make sure you aren't overwhelmed. 46 acres is a lot for one person. You could mess it up. We can manage it together, as a team." Tyler nodded like one of those bobbleheads you put on a car dashboard. "Yeah, man, I can help run the cabins or something. Get a cut. Everyone wins." I didn't answer immediately. I let the room fill with its own discomfort, let the air grow heavier, let the silence drag across their expectations like sandpaper. Then, in the calmest voice I'd used in years, I said the 6 words that sliced the entire scene in half. "Actually, I'm not getting anything." The shift was instant. Emily's smile cracked like a thin piece of glass. "What?" "The lawyer told me everything goes to the state," I said with a shrug. "Estate taxes, complications. Apparently it's tied up beyond saving. Basically, I'm not inheriting a dime." Josh swore under his breath. Carla's lips tightened until her mouth disappeared entirely. Tyler muttered, "Man, this sucks," barely trying to hide his disappointment. And then, like someone hit a switch, the affection evaporated. The concern dissolved. The urgency died. Their faces emptied out until they were little more than strangers wearing familiar heads. They mumbled half-hearted excuses, appointments, errands, things they suddenly had to do, and walked out the door one by one. No goodbye, no hug, not even a backward glance. In under 5 minutes, after hearing there was no money, they left just as quickly as they came. 5 minutes. 5 minutes was all it took for them to discard me again. But this time, something was different. This time, I didn't feel that old sting in my chest. I didn't feel heartbreak or disappointment or confusion. I didn't feel like I'd lost them. I felt the exact opposite. I felt clarity. Pure steel-edged clarity. Because now I knew, without doubt, without hopping otherwise, without lying to myself, that their affection had always been leased, not owned, rented, not given, conditional, not real. And beneath that clarity, there was something else too. Something colder, sharper, patient. I was waiting. Waiting for the moment when their greed, hungry, impulsive, insatiable, would push them so far they couldn't come back from it. Because greed doesn't stop when you tell it no. Greed grows. Greed festers. Greed claws for more. And I didn't have to wait long for it to show its true fangs. Trust me, the moment came. And when it did, it set fire to everything. 3 days passed after they walked out of my house, and in those 3 days not a single one of them called, texted, or checked in. The silence was familiar, too familiar. It wrapped itself around me like an old blanket I didn't want anymore but couldn't throw away. I told myself I was done being surprised by their absence. I told myself I'd seen every shade of their indifference. I told myself there was nothing left that could hurt me. I was wrong. On the 4th morning, just when dawn was swallowing the last bit of night, my phone rang. Not a message, not a voicemail, a direct call. The name on the screen made my stomach tighten. Jonathan Reeves. His voice came through the line sharp, clipped, and urgent, so unlike his usual calm, lawyerly tone that I knew something was wrong before he even said the words. "Mr. Cross," he said without greeting, "I need you in my office immediately." "What's going on?" I asked, already grabbing my keys. "I'd rather explain in person," he replied, "but you need to come now." That word, now, carried a weight that pushed me out the door before I even had both shoes tied. The drive to his office felt longer than it ever had. My heart kept beating in uneven stutters, my mind racing through possibilities. Had something happened to the estate? Had someone challenged the will? Had there been a legal error? But nothing prepared me for what he slid across the desk when I walked in. A thick stack of crisp papers, neatly bound, stamped, processed, and filed. "Your family," he said slowly, choosing each word with precision, "has filed a petition to contest your inheritance." For a moment, I just stared at him. I didn't understand. It felt like the words were floating above me rather than entering my ears. "Contest," I repeated. He nodded. "They're challenging the validity of Richard Malone's will. They are claiming that the estate should not be passed to you." My voice came out hoarse. "They think it belongs to them." Jonathan took a measured breath. "They are not claiming it belongs to them directly. They're claiming that you are not mentally fit to manage it." The air left my lungs. "Come again." "They're filing on the grounds of mental incapacity," he clarified. "They're saying you are unstable, financially irresponsible, and suffering from cognitive decline." I felt something sharp twist inside my chest. "They what?" "They have submitted statements," he continued, pulling out more documents, "suggesting that you have been making irrational financial decisions, that you've hidden monetary problems, that you're in denial about your health, and that you are in need of guardianship." That last word hit me like a hammer. Guardianship. As in, legally declaring me incapable of managing my own life. As in, stripping me of independence. As in, turning me into a puppet they could control, so they could control the estate. My hands curled into fists on their own. "They know I'm fine. They know I've been fine." Jonathan nodded. "They are using your recent story about financial struggles as proof. They're saying you've been deteriorating for years and too proud to admit it." A hot pulse of anger shot through me. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This wasn't a disagreement. This was betrayal, cold, calculated, and signed under penalty of perjury. Emily, Josh, Carla, Tyler. My own blood had marched into a courthouse and told a judge that I was incompetent, useless, broken, a man who needed to be babysat. All for money that wasn't theirs. For a property they had no claim to. I tasted bitterness rising in my throat. So this is what they think of me. Jonathan looked at me carefully. "They think of the estate, Mr. Cross, not you." I exhaled slowly, forcing down the rage boiling up inside me. Then, in a voice so steady it startled even me, I said, "Let them try." Jonathan lifted an eyebrow. "You want to challenge the petition?" "No," I said. "I want to watch them dig their own graves. I want to see how far they'll go when they think they're about to get rich. I want to see them bleed every last drop of decency they have left." Jonathan's expression hardened with a kind of professional respect. "Very well, but be warned. People driven by greed do not stop on their own." He was right. They didn't. They escalated. They rotted. They struck harder. And the very next week, the betrayal sharpened into something even uglier. It started with a knock on my door one afternoon. A soft knock. A familiar knock. The kind Emily used when she was 12 and wanted to borrow the car keys she wasn't old enough to drive. When I opened the door, she was standing there alone, her makeup carefully smudged to look like she'd been crying, her nose red, her shoulders small, her posture fragile. "Dad," she whispered, voice trembling, "we just want to help you." She stepped inside before I invited her, clasping her hands together like she was praying for my soul. "You're making this harder than it has to be," she murmured. "If you just signed the paperwork, everything could be simple." I frowned. Paperwork. She reached into her purse, pulled out a sleek folder, and slid it across my kitchen table. I opened it. My eyes scanned the first lines, and suddenly everything inside me shifted. Power of attorney. Not temporary. Not limited. Not protective. Full. Total. Irreversible. If I signed that document, I would have been handing her, and by extension all of them, control over everything I owned, every account I had, every decision I could make. They would control my money, my property, my medical rights, my future. "Emily," I said slowly, lifting my head, "why are you doing this?" Her face twitched, just barely, a crack in the mask. The sweetness drained from her eyes, replaced by something harder, colder, impatient. "Because," she said, voice sharpening, "if you don't sign it, we'll take it to court, and we'll win." There was no sadness in her tone, no fear, no love. Only threat. Only hunger. Only calculation. I pushed the folder back across the table. Then I stood, walked to the door, opened it. "Get out." She didn't move. "Dad." I said, "Get out." This time she left without tears, without a hug, without a second glance. And she wasn't the only one. Josh showed up 2 days later with a cheap grin and a rehearsed speech. Carla arrived with printed articles about elderly financial decline. Tyler came with a story about wanting to protect me. All of them with schemes, all of them with angles, all of them with hands outstretched for something that didn't belong to them. And each one of them, with every lie they told, every threat they whispered, every performance they attempted, shattered another piece of whatever love I had left. But what they didn't know, what they couldn't possibly know, was that they weren't the only one.
2 weeks later, the day finally arrived. The day every lie, every manipulation, every knife they plunged into my back would be dragged into the light. The courthouse smelled like polished wood and old paperwork, and the air hummed with that cold, official silence that makes people speak in whispers. I walked down the hallway with Jonathan beside me, steady as always, while my heartbeat thudded in my ears like distant drums calling soldiers to a battlefield. Because that's what it felt like, a battlefield. And across the hall were the people I never thought I would have to fight, my own flesh and blood. They were all already there, standing together like a united front, pretending to be a loving family who cared too much. Emily wore a pale blue dress, something soft, something innocent-looking, the kind of outfit she picked deliberately when she wanted to influence people. She was twisting her engagement ring around her finger, a nervous habit she thought nobody had ever noticed. Josh leaned against the wall, arms folded, trying to look calm but tapping his foot so aggressively it looked like he was trying to drill a hole through the tile floor. Carla had dressed like she was going to a board meeting, sharp suit, hair pulled back so tightly the skin near her temples stretched, and she had that clipped, superior expression on her face she used whenever she thought she had the moral high ground. And Tyler. He was scrolling on his phone, smug grin and all, like he was already spending money he hadn't even touched yet. When Emily spotted me, her expression pinched into something sharp, almost metallic. She walked forward on stiff heels, each click echoing like a countdown. "You should have signed, Dad," she muttered under her breath, her fake smile returning just long enough for the nearest security guard to see. "Now it's gonna get messy." I didn't respond. I didn't need to. Because she had no idea how messy things were about to get, but not for me. We were called in, and as the heavy double doors opened, the smell of paper and furniture polish grew stronger. My family rushed to their seats across from us, their eyes darting around like predators making sure no one else was fighting them for the kill. Jonathan took the seat to my right, adjusting his tie, tapping one pen lightly on the table. He never did anything without meaning, and that tap, it was a signal. Something was about to happen. The judge entered, a stern woman with silver hair and a reputation that could make lawyers sweat. She gave a brief nod. Everyone stood. Everyone sat. Then Jonathan rose immediately, as if he'd been waiting for this moment his entire life. "Your Honor," he began, his voice carrying with crystal clarity, "I'd like to submit new documentation regarding Mr. Cross's financial status." The shift in the room was instant. It was like someone turned off the oxygen. Emily's head snapped toward him. Josh's jaw tensed. Carla's eyes narrowed. Tyler finally looked up from his phone, frowning. The judge raised her hand. "Proceed." Jonathan opened a thick folder, one I hadn't seen, one nobody except him had touched. The sound of the paper sliding out was strangely dramatic, like a curtain being pulled back before a show. "Contrary to the petition filed," Jonathan said, his tone like a blade sliding across glass, "Mr. Cross is not financially unstable. In fact, he is demonstrably solvent. And more importantly, he has recently become the beneficiary of an $8.4 million estate." You could have dropped a match and lit the whole room on fire. Emily gasped so loudly it echoed. Josh's lips twitched like he was fighting a scream. Carla's jaw fell open, her composed mask shattering. Tyler slumped in his chair, as if the words had physically hit him across the chest. Jonathan wasn't done. "Furthermore," he continued, eyes briefly flicking toward my family with something almost like amusement, "Mr. Cross intentionally withheld this information from the petitioners due to ongoing interpersonal conflicts and repeated acts of alienation on their part." My family stared at him like he had just spoken in another language. The judge looked at them over her glasses. "Is it true," she said slowly, "that you attempted to gain legal guardianship over Mr. Cross based on claims that he is mentally and financially incapable of managing his own affairs?" Dad wasn't," Emily stuttered, her polished composure leaking away like water from a cracked cup. Josh slammed his hands on the table. "He lied, he acted broke, he played us." Jonathan turned to him, his expression neutral but his words slicing. "Acting broke," he said smoothly, "is not mental incompetence. It is simply testing loyalty, something you all failed rather spectacularly." Even the judge looked like she was trying not to react. She made a few notes, shuffled a few papers, and then delivered her verdict with a calmness that made every word feel like a hammer strike. "Petition denied." Emily flinched. "No grounds for guardianship." Josh cursed under his breath. "Mr. Cross is fully competent." Carla's face drained of color. "Case dismissed." The gavel came down with a sharp crack, and it felt like something inside me finally snapped free. But it wasn't over. Because the judge wasn't finished. She leaned slightly forward, her eyes moving across the four faces that had tormented me for weeks. "Given the malicious and unfounded nature of this petition," she said, "Mr. Cross is entitled to pursue legal damages. He may also request restraining measures if he feels harassed or endangered. I would advise each of you to consider the gravity of your actions." For the first time since this nightmare began, my family didn't look angry. They didn't look smug. They didn't even look ashamed. They looked afraid, truly deeply afraid. Not because they lost the money, but because they finally understood that whatever control they believed they had over me, whatever strings they thought they could pull, that illusion was gone. I wasn't the weak one anymore. I wasn't the desperate one. I wasn't the man begging for their love or acceptance or respect. They were the ones exposed. They were the ones shown for what they truly were. And as the courtroom emptied, and their panic followed them like shadows clinging to their heels, I realized something powerful. The truth hits harder than any lie they ever told. And I still wasn't done with them. Not even close.
The courtroom door hadn't even swung shut behind me before I felt them. Their footsteps, 4 sets, rapid, unsteady, desperate. The echo followed me down the long marble hallway of the courthouse like a stampede of regret that had shown up too late. I didn't look back at first. I didn't need to. I could feel the tension clawing through the air, could smell the panic coming off them like sweat. When I stepped outside, the sun was bright, too bright, almost mocking. The parking lot glistened with heat, and I was halfway to my truck when the ambush finally closed in. "Dad, wait." Emily's voice cut through the air, sharp and frantic. Before I could take another step, they rushed in around me, forming a circle, blocking my path like they thought numbers would give them power. Like they still believed the old version of me, the one who second-guessed himself, who still held hope for them, was standing there. He was. This was a new man they helped create by betrayal. Emily stepped forward first. She always did. She tried the soft approach, voice trembling, eyes watery, lips caught between apology and manipulation. "Dad, please listen. We were confused. Everything happened so fast. We didn't know the truth." Josh jumped in immediately, raising his hands like he was the reasonable one. Yeah. You should have told us, man. You should have just been honest. You lied to us first." Carla's voice cracked with a wobbling sob, the same fake, polished tears she'd used on countless men, employers, and relatives throughout her life. "Daniel, honey, listen to me. We were only trying to help you. We thought you were in trouble. We panicked." Tyler predictably took the defensive route. "Look, Unc, can we just start over, okay? Like, wipe the slate clean or something. No hard feelings, we're family." Family? The word sounded like poison. I looked around at them. 4 faces I once thought would hold me when I was old, check on me when I was sick, call me just to ask if I needed anything. Faces I once imagined smiling at my triumphs, supporting my decisions, showing up for me the way I had always shown up for them. But now I saw the truth, clear as glass. These weren't family members. These weren't people who loved me. These weren't people I could trust. They were takers. Consistent, exhausting, hungry takers. People who drained you dry, and then complained the sponge wasn't wet enough. I took a breath, slow and steady. Then I said it. "No." Emily's eyebrows jumped. "No what?" "No," I repeated louder this time, but still soft. Calm, deadly calm. No more money, no more support, no more loans, no more help, no more second chances. The words fell like a hammer, breaking a stained glass window. Josh's jaw tightened. He stepped forward, a flash of anger sparking in his eyes. "You can't just cut us off, old man." I turned to him and let the silence settle first, heavy, uncomfortable. Then I gave him the truth he had never expected. "Watch me." His face twitched like he'd been slapped. Carla tried to recover the situation. She clutched her chest, voice quivering. "But I'm your sister." "And yet," I said quietly, "you treated me like I was useless the moment you thought I had nothing. You were ready to take control of my entire life, not to help, but to access whatever you thought I had left. You didn't even hesitate." She opened her mouth, but no sound came out. Tyler shoved his hands deep into his pockets, his voice trembling with frustration. "So what? You're choosing money over us?" I shook my head slowly. "No, I'm choosing peace." The shock that rippled through them wasn't dramatic. It was quiet, small, like the way a candle flickers right before it goes out. Nobody knew what to say. Nobody stepped forward. Nobody apologized, not really. Because apologies require remorse, not fear of consequences. So I walked around them. They didn't block me this time. They just moved aside like the truth had physically pushed them back. I didn't threaten legal action. I didn't yell. I didn't gloat. I didn't punish them the way they deserved. That wasn't the revenge I wanted. My revenge was colder, cleaner, simpler. I removed myself. I moved to Richard's estate, my estate now, a gorgeous stretch of land wrapped around a still, shimmering lake that reflected the sky like a mirror. The air smelled like pine and dirt and real freedom, not the toxic fumes of guilt and obligation I had breathed for years. The cabins were old but sturdy. I renovated them with my own hands, feeling the strength return to me with every board replaced, every nail hammered. I reopened the small lodge, hired a local couple who became real friends, not transactional parasites. I met people who valued honesty, who didn't measure kindness by bank statements, who didn't love in percentages or investments. For the first time in decades, I felt alive. Back in the city, my phone lit up for weeks. Dozens of messages. Hundreds, maybe. Emily tried apologizing. Josh tried bargaining. Carla tried guilt. Tyler tried playing the victim. Years have passed now, quietly, steadily, the way water smooths the edges of a stone without anyone noticing until it shines. I'm 57 years old, though some mornings I feel younger than I did at 40. That's the strange thing about peace. It takes years off you the way stress once added them. My hair's gone grayer around the temples, and my hands have a few more scars from repairing fences, polishing decks, fixing old wooden steps at the cabins. But my heart, it's lighter than it's ever been. I wake up each morning to the soft whisper of the lake brushing against the shore. The world moves slowly here, gently. The sun climbs above the tall pines like it's in no rush, painting long streaks of gold across the water, turning the surface into a glowing path that leads straight to the horizon. I sit on my porch with a mug of strong coffee, feeling the warmth seep into my fingers, breathing in fresh air that hasn't been touched by city noise or human chaos. I'm alone, but I'm not lonely. There's a difference people rarely understand until they've lived through both. For years, I lived surrounded by people, children, relatives, neighbors, employees, friends of friends. But I was lonely, deeply lonely. The kind of loneliness that comes from giving everything and receiving nothing in return. A loneliness that grows inside you like a slow, suffocating vine tightening around your chest. But here in this quiet place where the world pauses long enough to let you hear your own heartbeat, I am alone, but never lonely. I am full, whole, present, at peace. Sometimes when the wind is still and the lake looks like polished glass, my thoughts wander backwards, to my children, to my sister, to my nephew, to all the faces that once framed my life like portraits on a wall, familiar, comforting, worn by time. I wonder where they are now, what they're doing, whether they ever learned anything from what happened. Sometimes I picture them sitting in their homes, scrolling through old photos they once refused to send me copies of, maybe wondering how I am, maybe convincing themselves they were the victims, maybe telling new people in their lives a version of the story where they're the heroes and I'm the unstable, dramatic, unreasonable father who pushed everyone away. I used to imagine them changing, growing, understanding. Now, I don't imagine anything at all. Because I learned that expecting change is the fastest road back to heartbreak. When those memories rise, the nights I stayed up worrying about their bills, the holidays I spent cooking just to eat alone because they had other plans, the birthday presents they forgot, the Father's Day cards that never came, I remind myself of something else, something sharper, something that replaced hope with clarity. I remember the living room where they walked out the moment I lost my money. Not when I lost health. Not when I lost joy. Not when I lost myself. Only when I lost money. I remember the courthouse papers requesting guardianship over me, a grown man with a functioning brain and working hands. Guardianship so they could access an estate they didn't earn and didn't even know existed. Guardianship that would have let them decide where I lived, how I spent, who I talked to, what treatment I needed. I remember Emily's trembling eyelashes as she slid power of attorney papers across the table, her voice dripping with practiced sympathy. I remember Josh's bitterness, the way he said, old man like I was a broken machine. I remember Carla's crocodile tears, how quickly they dried the moment she thought the money was gone. I remember Tyler's half-hearted hugs, eyes scanning my house for valuables even as he pretended to care. And above all, I remember the moment, the exact second, I saw them not as family, but as people who only came to drink from a well they never helped fill. But then there's Richard, my old friend, my mentor, my compass when my own world spun out of control, a man who saw through people like glass and understood human nature with painful accuracy. The kind of friend who didn't sugarcoat reality because he respected you too much to lie. His handwriting still burns in my memory, the messy loops and uneven lines from the letter he left me. Money won't change a person. It just shows you who they already are. For years, I didn't believe that. For years, I defended people who wouldn't have defended me. For years, I confused love with obligation, kindness with weakness, generosity with responsibility. But when I pretended to have nothing, when I crafted the simplest disguise, one made not of costumes or props but silence and empty pockets, the truth stepped into the light, not because they went looking for it, but because their own nature dragged it out of them. Pretending to be poor didn't break my family. It exposed them. Everything that came after, the probate notice, the petition, the power grab, it all peeled back the layers of excuses I'd told myself for decades. Suddenly, I could see not what I wanted to see, but what had been there all along. People who love you for what you give don't love you. They love the giving. People who stand beside you only when your pockets are full don't stand beside you. They stand beside the pockets. And people who abandon you at your lowest were never with you in the first place. Now, sitting on my porch with the wind brushing the surface of the lake, and a life far simpler than the one I once chased, I understand something I wish I'd learned 20 years earlier. Love should never be tested with money, but people should be.